begin with, as is the case with the other centers, the intellectual center has three parts: a moving part or an instinctive moving part, an emotional part, and an intellectual part. And as with those centers, the moving part operates with little or no attention. It's where we can just talk or gather information. We're not, and even read without reading in depth. We can kind of record information. That's the part of us that's doing that. And then the emotional part is where our attention gets drawn to something, usually in the form that one of the best ways to recognize the Queen of Diamonds is we become very interested in a topic, a subject, and we start to get a little bit excited. We devote a little extra energy and time to reading something, trying to digest more information, not for the sake of just gathering the information, but for the purpose of knowing more about a topic. And then the intellectual part of the intellectual center is more where there's very much controlled attention. Now it's a focused study. Now it's research almost. It's research gathering. And whereas you could say the moving part is interested in information for information's sake, and the emotional center is interested in information for the sake of knowing about it, being able to know about something and be able to talk about it as though one knows all about it. When in fact, you may not really know much, but you've read a lot, you've heard a lot, you've gathered a lot of information, and now you enjoy talking about it and you get energy from that. And but as opposed to those two, or beyond those two, encompassing those two, is the intellectual part of the intellectual center, which is not interested just in information and it's not interested in just knowing about things. It's interested in understanding. It now wants to put all the parts together into a whole, into a bigger understanding, a bigger picture. The Jack of Diamonds, meaning the moving part, just data, information, give me the rules, tell me the exceptions to the rules, give me as much information as I can to record, and it's all fragmented, it's all compartmentalized. But this is an enormous database, our Jack of Diamonds, the moving part. And information is important. It's data. It is essentially a database. And then the emotional part is more, I want to be able to talk about any subject. I want to be able to talk about every subject. I want to know everything on everything. And I want to be able to talk about it, not just repeat information and not just respond. I want to be able to talk. Queen of Diamonds enjoys consuming lots of information and then talking about it to other people. When I say the Queen of Diamonds, people who are centered in that part of the intellectual center frequently are verbose when it comes to ideas and theories and such. But we all have this Queen of Diamonds in us, and at times we'll find ourselves excited, enthusiastic about, passionate about an idea or a topic. And we've gathered lots of information, and now we can speak at length about it. And many times we do it to sort of impress other people how much we know. The person who knows the most at the dinner table, who takes up the most space, any topic comes up, they can associate freely to that topic. And one of the things about the emotional part of the Queen of Diamonds is it doesn't truly discriminate among ideas. Any idea is a good idea, as long as it can know about it, talk about it. Everything has more or less the same weight in terms of value, impact, importance, significance. Whereas the King of Diamonds, as I mentioned earlier, wants to understand, wants to piece things together, and is not interested just in talking associatively and covering a wide range of topics, wants to drill down into one topic. There's an expression you hear now, let's take a deep dive. And that's a loose, not, it's almost an inadequate description of what the King of Diamonds does. But it does indicate somewhat. The intellectual part of the King of Diamonds now can go and delve very deeply into something and make lots of connections and connect all the spokes to the hub of the wheel of an idea. And this is the slowest part of the intellectual center. And the intellectual center itself is already the slowest of the four centers. And this is a very patient, plodding, to some people boring because it's slow and it's deep reaching, far reaching, and trying to allow time to connect all the spokes of an idea to the hub of the wheel of that idea. Nowadays, you hear people when I've mentioned this before, when they talk, there's a habit, a tendency these days for people to talk very fast. And they're actually talking at the speed of the moving center. And I hope you can keep up with what I'm saying because I know what I'm talking about and I've already thought about it and I blah, 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 blah. And this is not, the King of Diamonds cannot follow that kind of conversation. It cannot glean anything of value. Why? Because it's now the intellectual center trying to operate at the speed of the moving center. The moving center is much faster than the intellectual center. And as is the instinctive center and as is the emotional center, which potentially is even the fastest of all, can be. This idea that the intellectual center is slow is sometimes seen as its weakness. And it's better to say perhaps that it is its limitation, that it's slow. But that limitation is also its strength in relation to the other centers. Because the other centers have a tendency to run away with themselves easily and quickly. Now, that's not true of the intellectual parts of each of the centers. The King of Spades, the King of Hearts, the King of Diamonds, they're all close friends. In fact, I was thinking about this. There's an expression in the Bible, love thy neighbor as thyself. And my perception of this is that the esoteric meaning of that is for each of the centers to appreciate and respect and honor, quote, love each of the other centers and to work in harmony, to work in tandem, to respect and to honor each other, especially when it comes to working in tandem toward promoting conscious awareness, promoting presence. Mihai, you have anything at this point that maybe what I've said stimulates some things you have, observations about the intellectual center and the parts of centers?
Yeah, the the jack of the moving part of the lecture center. Some bullet points will be just acquiring data, information, random facts, trivia. When you see these trivia people, trivia games, these are games for the jack of diamonds. It doesn't have relativity. It needs so black or white thinking, absolute thinking, literal thinking, uh, thinking through association, associating. Um, and that part is it's not that it's bad, it is actually very good, but it's more like a librarian that knows where all the files are. Uh, uh, even a clerk in some kind of big database. But the clerk is not the big thinker there. It's just providing blocks of information. Usually people centered there, they know a lot. They are good at trivia. They know a lot of stuff. Um, the queen, the emotional part of intellectual center, there's this emotion behind ideas and enthusiasm about ideas, about theories, about various things. And usually such person will buy a bunch of books and is really passionate about it, talks about it. The queen, the emotional part, is loses interest. It doesn't have enough energy, so it loses interest, and then we just have a bunch of books there, and then it goes into some other books, finds other books, switches interest. That's why it's tricky with this knowledge because it can be very fascinating for the intellectual center for the queen, but then if the interest is just there, then it doesn't have enough weight or emotional maturity and depth to actually stay with the work. And the king, yeah, it's the people usually, there are not many people centered in the king of diamonds, and usually they are more like in deep science or deep abstract thought. And strangely, they may not seem smart to other people. They may seem slow and heavy, not intelligent, just because you ask them, "Hey, how's it going today?" And they are not going to answer mechanically, so they'll take some time because they are actually processing about that. I think that's what I had.
Yes, that reminds me further that the Jack of Diamonds, the moving part of the intellectual center, is interested in, as I said, in information, in data, and in categorizing data. And the Queen of Diamonds, the emotional part, is interested, as I said, in just knowing a lot of data, and it's insatiable. Like all, as with all the queens, the Queen of Diamonds can never get enough knowledge. And it wants to, it's interested in, fascinated, as Mihai said, it's fascinated by the interconnectedness of lots of different ideas, or more accurately, maybe the associative similarity in different ideas and different theories and different fields of interest. And it sort of spreads itself as wide as it can across all areas of knowledge, tries to spread its wings, cast its blanket, its net over as wide an area of knowledge as it can. And it derives great satisfaction from this. But the point is, it can never get enough. And in a way, the Jack of Diamonds is the same. It can never quite, it's inexhaustible how much information you can put in this database. The human mind in this regard is astonishing that it can accumulate as much information as it can and keep it at the ready for when needed. But the moving part cannot think through an idea, cannot have what we call a long thought. It is just snippets. You see this now, I've mentioned this before too. On the internet, you see articles and they're one sentence and then a space and then another sentence and a space, or very short paragraphs. They are fragmented presentations of information. There's not much thinking behind them. And things aren't connected into a whole. When you finish reading some of those things on the internet, you're not quite sure what it said, what it was pointing to, what the conclusion is. Just lots of information. But the King of Diamonds, as with all the intellectual parts, is known for its discrimination. Now the King of Diamonds, it can discriminate, it can discard and say, well, that's not going to give me what I'm looking for. That's not going to fulfill me. That's not tied to my subject. I'm going to discard that for the time being and focus on the main point, the central point, the focal point. And you can see how, in this sense, the intellectual part, again, as is the case with the intellectual parts of all the centers, they can each govern their domain, their respective center. The king can now rein in the queen and can regulate and manage the jack, can regulate and manage that database. And it can kind of dampen the enthusiasm and channel that enthusiasm into focus, into intellectual focus, study of something, of a topic. I also want to mention the mechanical part in the fourth way. It's called the formatory center. And one of the reasons for that is because this is where we put information, but we put it all into form, into solid form. That's not a concept, it's already kind of form, but now we want it to be concrete. The Jack wants it to give it to me concrete. Give me the specifics, yes or no, right or wrong, black or white. What is it? Give me I need to put it in the right little container. And it has to be kind of exact, but not in an exact knowing way, but rather in an exact compartmentalized way. And this is form, and this is where a lot of people, you ask them a question and they respond from this part. The Jack of Diamonds will provide the response in words. And keep in mind that what's something about the intellectual center, even though it's the slowest, even though it doesn't have the expansiveness, the range, the depth of the emotional center, doesn't have the visualization capacity of the moving center, all of the other centers cannot speak without the help of the intellectual center. They all rely on the intellectual center. They all kind of send their messages of perceptivity to the intellectual center to articulate for them on their behalf. And a well-developed intellectual center that's working in harmony with well-developed other centers can perform this duty, this responsibility very adequately, and in a way that honors the kind of the tenor, the vibration, the intent of the other centers. But I say that because this relates to the idea of the formatory center, what's called the formatory apparatus. Because the other centers all rely on the intellectual center, and a lot of that information is then stored in the moving part, the Jack of Diamonds, this becomes the place from where many people think and respond, give a quick automatic response. It's something they've heard, a familiar phrase. This is where all these familiar words and phrases happen in society and culture at different times. Like, absolutely, all these words, they come out of the Jack, really. And they're easy to repeat, easy to use, easy to just fill in with. They don't involve thought, deep thought, focused thought. Anything else from your
Yeah.
intellectual center, Mihai?
Yes. From one angle now, we are trying to stay on topic. So this attempt to not deviate, not to randomly associate ideas and thoughts and connections with everything and deviating, that's an effort of the intellectual part of the intellectual center, the King of Diamonds. Actually, in this kind of meeting or circle that we do, especially for the round of knowledge, it's a good practice to, you may have all kind of eyes and all kind of associations and you want to say about this what you observed and noticed, but it can get spread and spreading thin. So staying on topic that is rare these days, and it's a good effort and strengthening of the intellectual center. Another thing is that when usual people they talk, you can see as with friends, of course there's the emotion center involved connecting, but then usually it goes one association to another, and if you were to trace back the intellectual content, it's just associative, random, meandering. So that's a good example of operating from the jacks in either modern society or regular. There's no requirement on that unless you are in academia or something like that. It has this some type of going towards the wrong work of certain exercises that you can observe, some tendencies that are very mechanical. Is we used to have this to watch for these opposite eyes. When somebody shares something, then we may have a thought like, yeah, but this and that, saying the opposite, contradicting right away. That's a good, we used to have an exercise in the other school where we will watch and refrain from opposite eyes right away, as well as at least allocating some time where we are not associating. It's a good exercise, even with a friend, you can be relaxed and all of that, but have half an hour where you are, at least, even if you meander, that's interesting, even if you meander and you go to conversation, at least observe how they say this, and then this evokes some other I linked to that goes to something else. Another exercise we used to have is to swallow the first I. When you meet or you talk to someone and they ask you something, or you are with some people in a group, and then something comes. That's one eye, to let it pass. Also, usually this I that wants to be said is linked also to a sense of other emotional tendencies and being seen or recognized. It's interesting to simply watch that and let it go as an exercise. I'm not sure if it is accurate, but from what I remember, one good way to strengthen the intellectual center and to provide a more favorable context for self-remembering is to stop thoughts. Have a certain period, not all the time of course, but have a certain period on the clock where one is as present as possible to the inner world and the outer world, and just notice how this comes and it wants to connect to other things, and we go in a so-called imagination, and to interrupt it, drop it, just drop it, delete. From one angle, I mean from all angles, due to the low state of consciousness and the weak intellectual center, the ultimate wrong work is this state of daydreaming, or as we call in the fourth way, imagination. That is wrong work of the intellectual center. Going back a little bit, you can see when people go to school, first grade, second grade, even before, there starts to be the development of the intellectual center, and even before, where we are told, oh, this is an oak tree, this is yellow, this is a duck, this is Popeye. So we are getting the concept. We are having a concept to a something, and that is unavoidable, and it's okay. But in the modern world, that is big emphasis put on that. And then what happens, that's why now we go in nature, or going in a walk, trying to be present, or do the looking exercise, there will be association, commentary. This is due to this over-exercised labeling, and we don't see that magnificent phenomenon. We call it, we don't see the thing, and we see the concept of it. And then we think we know.
I'm reminded, listening to Mihai, in the deck of cards, the symbology there that represents the centers, it's no accident that the intellectual center, the symbol there, is a diamond. And if you think for a moment about a diamond, what happens is light shines on a diamond, and then it refracts, it reflects at multiple angles all at once. And this is a good way to see the intellectual center, because there will be let's say, a topic, and the light of awareness will shine on that topic. And then the King of Diamonds has this capacity, when all of these reflections happen from all these different angles and all these different points of view, it can keep the focus on the center and accommodate all of those reflections and see them in relation to a central whole, or central idea, or central purpose, central aim. With the queen can be described as getting fascinated with the brilliance of the light that the intellectual center is capable of. All this reflection, all this many points of view. And there's a fascination and an excitement related to that brilliance of reflected light. In this case, the light of related to ideas, to knowledge. And the jack, what happens with the jack is it gets scattered to the far corners of each reflection. And now it's broken everything down into its little increments to store them, to record them, to register them, to be able to have them available. It loses all sight of the whole, loses all sight of the central part. And as Mihai said, that because there's this tendency to say yes, but it's as though an idea is heard in this part of the intellectual center, the jack, and then another part over here, which is seems contrary or opposite is immediately elicited in us. And then well, wait a minute, but you said, but what about this? And I don't, it does that way. And this is just good to observe and to see, where am I in my self when thinking about something or engaging in a conversation? Am I getting thrown to all the many corners and trying to sort them out with exactitude in their compartments? Or am I caught up in the brilliance of, oh, let's talk some more about that? Or you know what happened to me? That's interesting you said that, Joe, because I was in Europe the other day and blah, blah. They also say that in science. No, but the artists in the 17th century had a very similar idea, and and then it goes off running there. And it's to see what happens, these reactions in ourselves. Even then, me imitating that just now, mimicking that, I had a flush of energy that was from that Queen of Diamonds excitement. It's different than the Queen of Hearts. It's about ideas. It's about knowledge. It's not about feelings and about people. It's more about truth than it is about beauty. And that's the thing. The King of Diamonds is interested in truth, whereas the King of Hearts, let's say, is interested in beauty and a deep emotional understanding of reality. That's why the King of Hearts is so powerful for us. It has a much broader capacity to absorb and perceive and understand than the King of Diamonds in many ways. However, it's also no accident that the diamond is used often to cut through other metals. It has this unique capacity as a mineral. It is almost akin to a laser in the natural world. It can cut very precisely through things. And the King of Diamonds can do this. And it can do this with a runaway emotion, can do this with a mood. It can cut through with a right way of thinking about the situation in a way. And here's one of the most important things we could understand about the King of Diamonds. It can cut through right away with an attitude that promotes non-identification and aligns with awareness rather than, whereas our queens of sinners, our emotional parts of sinners, they tend to heighten and reinforce and promote identification. They live off of that same energy as identification. They become sort of the large valves in us that open when we're identified. The emotional parts of sinners, yay, come on in. I'm ready. I want to run with this, whatever it is, whether it be movement or thought or emotion. I'm ready to be identified. I'm the response mechanism for identify. I'm the best student in the class for responding to identification when it happens. That's what the queen is equipped for, to release that energy in a mechanical way. But it's fun sometimes to go look at these cards and see, why are the diamonds and the hearts red? Why are the spades and the clubs black? This is interesting to think about, to study. And why a diamond? Why does that represent intellectual center? Why a heart representing the emotional center, as obvious as that may seem? And why a club and why a spade?
And it's interesting that also the kings, they have a sword. If I remember correctly, they have a
Mhm.
sword. They have a sword in their hand. And I guess associating with non-duality, because I feel these are connected, very connected. They don't speak about centers in non-duality, traditional Advaita. However, the traditional Advaita has a very strong use of using the higher, they call it higher reasoning or viveka or discrimination. They want to strengthen this higher capacity of the intellect to discern through things. And actually, the study of the system is a very good way to strengthen the intellectual center. And also the study of the system and materials and stuff like that, they will inspire us, so they will fuel the work, will fuel the emotional center. That's why study of the system, study of ideas, discussing about these ideas in an intentional way, they they strengthen our work. Um, in terms of this discrimination, even this, as we there's this knowledge, and then we can verify that they are thoughts, they are feelings, but they come and go, and I'm not them. There's a call in non-duality, neti, not this, I'm not this, I'm not that, because they go and something remains, so I is on the side of that which doesn't come and go. And to have verified that, then this is a sword. And then when things are swarming us and all of this, we can use this higher reasoning, or with a deep emotional state, we are struggling with it, they are enmeshed with it, they are suffering it, and then we can have a work eye that will remind us to, this is not me, but still allow it, but this is not me. There's another non-dual pointer would be that there is no me in this feeling. This feeling is in me as this which is aware. For myself, I noticed that, let's say I need to prepare for a topic or something, it requires effort. So to be in the king of diamonds requires effort. And for me, I noticed that I'm loosely thinking about this topic, but then I need to drop it somehow and kind of relax and be present, and then it comes to me. So it comes from another level. I have the main ideas, but then if I just go with the main ideas, will be some just regurgitating and being with them, and then the higher idea will form itself. That's my operating system, which I'm not intellectual centered. But I remember that when I was visiting Francis, and he has a very strong intellectual component. I'm not sure what's his center of gravity, but he was not in the kitchen, but it was his computer. There was a page put down, and I was curious, and I was curious, like I wanted to see what was on this page of Francis' computer, and I turned the page, and there was a whole thing of equations, mathematical equations. And then at breakfast, I asked him, I said, what is that? He said, oh yeah, I just do this sometimes. It's kind of enjoyable to do some equations. His intellectual center is different, and yeah.
Something else about the King of Diamonds, and it if you think of the King of Diamonds and the King of Hearts as brother and sister, in a way, this is what the fourth way is referring to. This is where what the fourth way calls observing eye and deputy steward and steward start to form. It is really an association, a collaboration between the King of Hearts and the King of Diamonds. The King of Spades, yes, can participate in this, and even the King of Clubs. And yet the focus and the formulation and the determination principally come from this King of Diamonds, King of Hearts collaboration that becomes stronger, as Mihai said, studying these ideas, connecting them to other ideas that bring about a bigger picture, larger understanding related to our topic, which is awakening, awareness, enlightenment. How does everything tie into that? And this is where these two parts come in. And particularly, this is the King of Hearts can become almost the foreman of the ranch of all the horses of the emotional center. And they can work together quite beautifully. And you can feel it when you're focused more emotionally and more intellectually relative to these ideas, relative to the effort you're making, relative to your understanding of why you're trying to be present or want to be present. and developing a broader and deeper and more specific understanding of how all these different things we try, these exercises and everything, how they all connect together and how they are all necessary parts in this process, for lack of a better word, process. Yes.
There's another idea here. They speak in Buddhism. So before they train people to go into meditation, and from one angle, meditation is being aware of being and everything else. That is not possible if there is not enough attention, there's not enough concentration. And when we start the work, there is not enough ability to focus attention and concentrate. Therefore, that's why people sit to meditate, and then it's like frustrating because it goes all over the place like a ship without a rudder, blown by wind of every thought and every story. Watch out for this tendency to now just study these ideas and think about it all the time. At the same time, it's important to develop some ability to concentrate. And concentration is actually what Peter said. Concentration is this part of the machine, the intellectual part of the King of Diamonds, the intellectual part of the emotion center. That's the noble desire of the heart, dedicated to the work or to reaching truth or God or being more awake. And as even in a sport, as in tennis or something, you learn something and you need to concentrate. And it is important to have some aims or something. That's why this no stopping thoughts and being very present, that requires effort, and it's a way of developing concentration, without which we can't really go into this global sense of presence.
Another good way to develop this part of us, and we've mentioned this before too, is to listen very carefully when someone else is speaking, to listen to each word and try to resist, let's not resist, to not pay too much attention to associative thoughts that come in, which they do. That's what they do. That's their job, to keep putting up new associative connected thoughts. But now you can feel it, you can focus, you can listen to each word and really listen without being concerned about your view on the topic right away, to pay close attention. And the same thing with reading, to read very carefully, slowly, and stop at the end of a sentence and reflect a little bit. Really chew an idea and put it all the way in and chew it, just as Wendy's doing, and swallow and taste the idea, taste the thing you're trying to understand. And each of the centers has their own digestive tract and their own process of taking in information. We need to feed them, and we need to make sure we don't just spit it out right away. And this is what happens often. Mihai mentioned trivia. We also do this with news and media and social media and information. We're taking in a lot of junk food relative to the intellectual center. And we could be choosing from a different menu. And there's often a lot of resistance in us to do this because French fries are so good and milkshakes taste so good and pizza's fun. But with the intellectual center, with the emotional center too, being more discriminatory and becoming more of a gourmet, a gourmand really, in terms of what we take in and feeling the result, feeling the effect, can go a long way and have a big impact on us, on our mood, on our energy, on our focus, and on our alignment with being present more often and for longer.
One other idea that I noticed, verified, that in a lower state of consciousness, we have much more thoughts, many more thoughts, and there's also unnecessary thinking and associations and busy mind. The head is like a taxi. We are taken with every thought, and it's incessant. And for many people, it's not just imagination, but it's unpleasant imagination. It is negative imagination of terrible things that can happen. In a higher state of consciousness, there are much less thoughts. There are less thoughts. There's space between thoughts. Mind is quiet. So the mind becomes more tamed. The mind, or the intellect, let's say, or this monkey mind in Zen, initially it has no master, and it just operates all the time, and it bites people. The dog is biting the master, biting other people, and is all the time barking. And as self-consciousness is more online, longer and more often, there's more of this presencing and tuning into being more often. We have this habit. It's a new way of being. Then the mind is more of a tool, or a well-trained. If you all saw, I saw some movie with marine dogs, German shepherds, but they are very well trained, and they are staying put unless they are needed. They are waiting at the gate of the master. Only when the master needs it for something, then they activate. And it's much peaceful. And we can't, as long as the intellect or the monkey mind is like that, we can't see reality. We also we can't access the desireless state, which actually that's what we want. We want this peace that is without any reason and totally content, fulfilled through being. And in this intellect, wrong word of the intellect, and the machine needs to change a lot for that to happen.
Also, our moving parts and emotional parts are the arena in which so much self-preoccupation takes place. And everything reflects back. And in the case of the intellectual center, that diamond, it's usually reflecting back to me. What do I know? Where have I been? What have I seen? What do I understand? What can I? Whereas the king has this ability to turn the focus away from ourselves to something much bigger, much larger. And now we can start to look at the world and look at humanity, look at other people, and begin to comprehend all that in a very different way on a bigger scale. And then this in itself, this can be either the result of being more conscious, or it can also induce more consciousness, can induce that peace that Mihai is speaking about. You stop thinking about yourself. You stop dwelling on yourself and on your problems. You turn this light, this reflection away from me onto something bigger out there. Life can become very interesting then, much more interesting, in fact, as I'm sure everyone knows, without me in the picture, without me standing right in the foreground, in the way of everything else and as the priority.